The coffee industry, as we know it today, the modern coffee industry, is roughly around 200 years old. Well, coffee was grown in the hills of Karnataka, and also some indigenous plants are there found in the Travancore forests. As an organized industry, which was basically started by the British, like the tea industry. And that was in the 1800s sometime, in the middle, between the early and the middle 1800s. But subsequently, the growth of the coffee industry was fairly organized into what we now call the plantation sector. And it was both, by the time India gained independence, it was both an Indian and a European operation. The Europeans were at that time shifting out, and the Indians were getting into this industry in a big way. And subsequently, it became totally indigenous, Indian in outlook. Coffee from the very beginning has been consumed in this country only in and around the producing areas, which is basically at the base of the hills of Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, and to some extent in Kerala. But since Kerala had also had a tea, producing experience, so tea was also consumed there, whereas coffee was primarily in Karnataka and in Tamil Nadu, well, which was not now, but it was the largest consumer of coffee in this country. Most of what we produced in the years before World War II, or even before 1960-65, was exported. Even today, most of what we produce is exported. And we always found a ready market in Europe, because in those days, the British planters had this market in Europe tied up through their trading houses in London. In 1940, when the war started, the Coffee Board was constituted, because most of the British planters were called up for the war, and they wanted a marketing system which was predictable. They couldn't operate a marketing system from the farm because they were not in the country. So for which the Coffee Board was created in 1940, and it continued to operate to this day, but its marketing function ceased in 1991-92. Its basic marketing functions from 1940 onwards was to take all the coffee that's produced in this country, and first by order issued by the Governor General, and subsequently by the Act of Parliament, all growers had to submit their coffees to the Coffee Board, and they would be paid in the quantity and the quality of coffee that they pooled with the board. But of course, as I said, it came to an end in 1992 when the growers wanted to market their own coffee. So the board left the field of marketing of coffee, but the board continued in the areas of research, promotion, extension. These are the things that they do to this day. Coffee production in India, which was around 30,000 tons, I think around the early part of this century, is now 3 lakh tons. It has steadily grown. Though the area under coffee has not significantly grown, it has grown. But mainly productivity has increased in India. While we have a long way to go, productivity, which 18 years ago we were 150,000 tons, and today we are 300,000+ tons, and we have estimated that we probably will harvest 340,000 tons this year. So we have grown in the market. But the more interesting story is that while coffee has long been consumed in large quantities in North America and Europe, it was never a commodity that was widely consumed across the world. But in the last 15 years, due to the rise of the cafe culture, it has become a phenomenon that is recognized the world over as a completely new economy within the coffee economy. That is the expansion of coffee consumption through the cafes. And that has given great impetus to coffee, the coffee culture across the world, in Africa, in Eastern Europe, in the Middle East, in East Asia. All these countries, all these areas now are becoming very alive to the consumption of coffee. Now, this isn't all this achievement of this expansion of coffee consumption is not without its serious problems that we've had in the past before this phenomenon took off. In 1999-2000, we had the worst coffee crisis ever in the history of coffee consumption. The worst after 1929, the stock market crash of 1929. And by 2000, the coffee prices had plummeted to 1962 levels. And over 1.5 lakh growers were sent into deep debt. And of course, though the industry, with the help of the government, somehow tried to stave off the debt and try and keep them going till such time as prices picked up again, it was not an instant recovery. It took over 3 to 4 years for that recovery to start happening, for the surplus to come down, global surplus of coffee to come down. And it did come down. By the time it was 2006, 7, 8, the surpluses came down, the prices tended to stabilize. But it was felt deeply within the industry at that time that we must do something then other than simply concentrate on exports. Because we felt that if the export prices crashed, coffee growers, like we were left in 2002, will be in great jeopardy. Towards that end, the industry got together, various stakeholders in the industry, and we started a movement to promote coffee within the country. Of course, we also said that we will promote coffee anywhere in the world, but in the first instance, we wanted to increase the number of lips that tasted coffee in this country. The primary reason being that if we increase consumption in India exponentially, we will stave off these periodical surpluses that happen in the world. And we will also spur increased production, not just in India, but elsewhere in the world, to meet this new demand coming from countries like India, China. And that is where we are at today. Of course, today the coffee prices are ruling fairly well. This is primarily because of climatic conditions in Brazil and some other major producers of coffee like Central America, Colombia, and to some extent even Vietnam. But I dread to think what would happen if we had a 10-year period of good weather where everything was fine. Then once again coffee production will surge, and if we don't ramp up global consumption to meet this demand, then once again coffee farmers across the world, most of them are small growers. More than 90% of all coffee farmers in the world are small farmers. They will all stand to lose their livelihood. So I think India is one country that is trying this. We formed what is known as the India Coffee Trust to do this job. Other countries have similar organizations that do this sort of thing. And we are hoping that we would stave off any future price crashes through surpluses by this promotion of coffee consumption across the world. India, of course, we have a specific problem, not problem, but an opportunity and a problem. If we promote coffee consumption across the board and all our production is taken up for internal consumption, what would happen is good grades of coffee get mixed in with the rest of the coffee, become a commodity. And we lose out on a lucrative international market, especially in specialty coffees, high value coffees, high grade coffees. Now coffee has become something like wine across the world. It depends on the taster, it depends on the taste of coffee and how it's sold and how it's marketed. Of course, it must be good in the first place. But basically we can pitch a significant amount of our coffees, at least 25 to 27%, to a much higher value market. Something that we did not do during the coffee board's marketing period, and we are doing to a limited extent even now. But I think this campaign has to be transformed into something really workable, that we sell a portion of our produce as a very high value coffee, as being really top quality coffee, and see that the rest of the coffee is consumed within the country. Thus we get the best of both worlds. We get a good international market for our good coffees, but the rest of our coffees are consumed well in this country. I think if we reach that stage, it becomes an optimum situation for us. Coffee's consumption in this country is going up anywhere from between 6.5% to 9% per year increase. That is across the country. However, the Coffee Board has done a study and estimated it, and found that in the non-traditional areas, coffee consumption is growing at 43%. Of course, the base is extremely small because there's hardly any great consumption in those areas, but it's still growing at 43%, which is a very significant number. And if we can use that number, that growth rate, and keep that growth rate at the same level or thereabouts, of course it will come down as more consumption goes up. As consumption goes up, we, I think, are on a good wicket in terms of spreading coffee consumption across the country. I mean, for example, I've been involved in coffee association, coffee producers association affairs for the last 30 years, 35 years. And I remember 15, 20 years ago, go to Delhi to meet ministry officials for various things. And you can go around everywhere and you wouldn't find a single coffee shop. You wanted coffee, you went into a regular restaurant and you got terrible coffee. You went into a 5-star, you got just as bad coffee. They didn't know how to make good coffee either. But today, you go to anywhere in North India, I mean, not just talking Delhi, Punjab, Haryana, any one of those places, and you find every block has virtually, in the commercial district, has a coffee house. Not one, but many. Some of them are chain coffee houses, which like Coffee Day, but many of them are local entrepreneurs who are setting up their own coffee shop. Look at the amount of employment that this has caused. Hundreds, if not a few thousand coffee shops have sprouted all over the country. Each coffee shop, if you say, employs, say, 3 people minimum. Okay, one man who makes the coffee is the barista, called the barista, and people who help out with themselves. We've increased employment by a few 100,000. And that's bound to increase even more. So much so that, coffee has become a common topic in non-traditional areas of this country, Bombay, Delhi, Calcutta. Youngsters, college-age kids sit in coffee house and they're debating the merits of cappuccino and espresso and lattes and things like that. Something they wouldn't dream of talking about 10 years ago. You see, we aren't a large coffee growing country in the sense that we don't have enormous quantities. One of the impediments that India has to be a single origin coffee in the blends of the world is that we didn't have adequate quantities to supply. Now you went to Colombia. Colombia had something like between 8 and 12 million bags they produce. Brazil produced over 30 million bags. Many other countries, 2 million bags, 3 million bags in Central America, small countries, but they had the US market right next door. We now produce about close to 5 million bags, out of which 2 million is consumed in India. Now, of the rest, we were traditionally in Europe, we've been used as a good mix in a local blend. Roasters in Europe use Indian coffee to improve a blend between other origin coffees. We're just being known as a good origin. That is, people will drink it because it is Indian coffee, not because it's part of a good blend in Europe. I think that would be the highest for us when we promote coffee abroad. Eventually we must reach a stage where somebody will want Indian coffee because it is Indian coffee, not because they want coffee because Indian coffee is part of a blend. And once we reach that level, we'll be doing India and our coffee industry a great favor. That is something that we should achieve, I think, in the near future. We need to differentiate our market. That's vitally important. So therefore, we could have some very high value coffee. Just like wine. You can buy a bottle for $1,000, you can buy a bottle for $2. We want to be also in the $1,000 category for some of our coffees. We have that body in our coffee. We have that taste characteristic, which allows us, which make our coffees uniquely amenable to drinking coffee with milk. So we do have advantages. We are a good coffee. We are an excellent coffee. Now, if I turn around and say we're the best coffee in the world, I cannot say that. But today, even the best coffees in the world, or so-called best coffees in the world, are not liked by everybody, every consumer. So these classifications tend to sort of disappear when you get to the marketplace, because a consumer can turn and say, I love Indian coffee. I don't care too much for a Colombian coffee, cup to cup. So we want to get more consumers who will say that. It was never ever sophisticated except in Tamil Nadu, where we had for decades and decades and decades, generations, we had what is known as the Iyer coffee. It was the Tamil Nadu filter coffee that was made in households in Tamil Nadu, which gave it that great coffee. In Delhi, I think you would have had coffee in the earlier years in Woodlands in Delhi, which gave you this type of coffee, this type of Tamil Nadu filter coffee type thing. But today you have the espresso type coffees. Now, the espresso machine was a machine that was invented in the 60s, but it gave a new direction to coffee consumption, because filter coffee is basically the slow process by which water filters through the grinds and into the cup or into a container. Whereas espresso is when the invention was to force hot water through the grinds quickly and infuse the coffee and get the decoction out at the other end of it. And it had a unique taste of its own. It took in a lot of the taste of the coffee and the grinds and everything else. And a lot of nuances went with it, which is why espresso is a huge seller across the major markets of the world. People go for espresso in a big way. Your cappuccino is what? Espresso with milk with froth. That's it. So therefore, there are two different types. There's a filter coffee, which is one part of the market. Then you have espresso, which is another part of the market. We proved that our washed robustas are a very good part of an espresso blend in parts of Europe. It's been accepted. Now it's only a recent phenomenon in the last 8 to 10 years, but it has been accepted as a good part of an espresso blend. So now we're touching both markets, the espresso market as well as the traditional filter market, which we're already there at.